Lois talked about how her call to worship was based on being outdoors, and I think the songs were very wonderful. Good choices, Elizabeth. Also very outdoorsy for the beauty of God's earth. Lovely stuff. Well, guess what? Even my opening jokes were geared toward being outside. I was going to draw attention to the fact that a lot of people will sit on blankets and like sheets and things like that as they come to the outdoor services at the park. And I was going to say that my favorite, obviously the best of all of them, are the quilts. The quilts are clearly the best. I was going to say that, and then I realized that that was simply a blanket statement. Okay, anyway. So thankfully we can still have a meal after church today. And as many of you were preparing to bring food for the meal, you probably went through something similar. Sonia sent me to the store, asked me to pick up 6 bottles of Sprite. Okay? I had one job, go get 6 bottles of Sprite, but I failed. I made a mistake. I was supposed to pick up 6 bottles of Sprite, and I picked 7-Up. All right, okay. See, that still works because we're still having the meal. That's why that first one wasn't funny. None of you are sitting on quilts. We are not only planning to eat after church today, but we are going to talk about food today. We're going to talk about food, well, kind of, right? Is this passage about food? Is it about physical food that you could grab and eat and consume? Or is it about something else? Is this a metaphor for something spiritual, something deeper, this longing that we have, like a hunger for God, a hunger and thirst for righteousness? So I asked those questions in kind of an either-or setup there, but I think the answer is yes, both and. I think this is very much about food. Come, why waste your money on things that don't satisfy? Come and get this food. Come get this drink. And I think it takes us a step deeper. So what we're going to do today is we're going to consider this passage. We're going to look at it both from a literal sense and from a metaphorical place. We're going to look at the context behind this and better understand how I believe that eating and the food that we raise, the food that we consume, the food that we buy, and with whom we eat this food is a spiritual act. And it is a spiritual discipline that we can develop in our lives. So let's go ahead and jump into this text this morning and try to better understand just what is going on in this passage. All right, so if you read through the book of Isaiah, if you read it from beginning to end, you will notice that there are some really weird highs and lows, inconsistencies. The first 39 chapters are just really depressing. If you sit down and read it, it's just sad. Isaiah just is receiving this word from God of all these things that are going to happen. They're going to be picked up and removed from their homes. They're going to be separated from their families. The land that they have known for all these years will be taken from them, and they will go into exile. So the first 39 chapters, spoiler alert, first 39 chapters are all really sad. So these first 39 chapters, these are warnings about what will happen. And then our passage for today comes from Isaiah 55. It's a section called Deutero-Isaiah. And Deutero-Isaiah changes the tone significantly. You come to chapter 40, and this is the one that Handel makes famous with his Messiah, where he begins to speak to the people about comfort. Comfort ye, my people. Your iniquity has been pardoned. So from chapter 40 till chapter 66, you have all these promises of comfort and joy, all these things that God will do for his people as they return from exile. So that's where our text for today from Isaiah 55 fits into the whole scheme of things. 70 years have gone past since Isaiah 39 was written, since the people went into exile and now are returning. So I read this scripture today and I realize that I have never really known hunger. I've never really been hungry. There was that time back in high school we did that 30-hour famine thing to raise money. I don't even remember what that was for. Anybody else do the 30-hour famine? You're aware of that? Really? That's not okay. Does not cross cultures. It's okay. So the 30-hour famine was like a fundraiser thing where like people would pledge money, like, oh, if you can go 30 hours without eating, we will give you, $5. Woohoo, and you pass it on. I'm sure it went to like some good organization. Don't worry about it. Okay. The people in Ohio watching right now know what I'm talking about. Actually, it's probably just something. No, that mean kid in school took the money. No. Anyway. That's my experience with hunger, like going through a 30-hour famine, or there was that time in 2017 where I thought a juice fast would be a good idea. It wasn't. No, like I don't know hunger, but I realized that my grandparents, and probably some of your grandparents, grew up in the years immediately after the Great Depression. Like my grandparents were extremely frugal people. And they came by it honestly. Like they grew up in a time when they didn't know where their next meal was coming from. They grew up in a time when things were rationed. I can't even imagine this. Where you could only buy so much things like flour or sugar or coffee. Yeah, like I have to limit my coffee today. Yeah, good luck with that. So I think like growing up, I realized like my grandparents, they never wasted any food. I haven't thought about it like this before, but like people that have ever slaughtered animal, like I'll just call out Glenn, he's right here. Like Glenn, I've helped process pigs with him before. Like you use everything but the oink, right? And even the oink sometimes. Don't ask what goes into your sausage. So my grandparents never wasted any food. Even if they couldn't finish everything that was on their plate when they ate at home, like it went into Tupperware, into the refrigerator, and they kept it for later. And even to this day, like I still have that mentality, like you have to keep this food. So if we have leftovers, I put it in the Tupperware and put it in the refrigerator where it will sit and rot for a week before I throw it away. But my grandparents never wasted food. And I moved to this 21st century. I realized that wasn't just a back then thing. It wasn't just post Great Depression that people didn't know where their food was coming from. And I remember growing up, in the summertime, we probably watched a little too much TV. Some things never change. And we had like 4 stations. So in the summertime, whenever we weren't doing chores, we could watch things like the Beverly Hillbillies and Bonanza. Yeah? Other people? All right. And I remember growing up and watching these shows, and then the commercials come on TV, and you always had those commercials by Sally Struthers. And she had some of you remember Sally Struthers. She would have these poor kids in Africa, and she would always show them. They had this distended abdomen, always had the flies crawling all over their face. And it was weird to me, but that really didn't hit home because it was foreign to me. Like it didn't really connect. Like honestly, I didn't really see a lot of African people in my community growing up. They didn't look like that. That didn't land for me. But something that happened more recently did really hit home for me. At least one day a week, I drive my kids to the middle school right back here to the west of us. Drop them off in the morning and then come over here for office hours at the church. And I remember one day after I dropped the children off, I see some kids just walking up to school along the road here. And one of the kids, these kids are my kids' age, these kids are the boy is eating a bag of potato chips for breakfast. And I'm like, and not only is he eating these potato chips, he's sharing them with his sister as they walk up the hill to school. And I can be a little bit judgmental, I know that. And the first thing that comes to my mind is, what kind of parent gives their kids potato chips for breakfast? But then I realize what kind of parent gives their kids potato chips for breakfast. It's the parent that has to give their kids potato chips for breakfast. I'm really thankful for the food services that we get here at the local schools now, but I realized that what I was seeing there as that child was eating potato chips for breakfast, it wasn't just a kid that wanted to eat junk food, it was something wrong with the system. And there's a word that we give to that today. There's kind of a newer phrase. We call that food insecurity. The USDA describes food insecurity as a lack of consistent access to enough food for every person in a household to live an active, healthy lifestyle. So it's not just that you have food or that you're hungry. Like, is it good food? Is it healthy food? It will allow you to live and flourish. Potato chips, I'm sorry, do not count. It's a vegetable, all right? So as I'm thinking about all that's going on here in today's passage, and I'm thinking about how I really don't know what it's like to wonder where my next meal is coming from, or I don't have to worry like my grandparents and scrape all those leftovers into the Tupperware and save them for later. All I have to do is go to the grocery store and buy something to eat. I started thinking that this is not the situation. My situation is not the same as what the Israelites experienced. They didn't know where their food was coming from. They were in exile. They didn't have secure food, lines of food to provide for them. They were living out of a bag of potato chips, sharing among the people. So as they're hunger, as they thirst, as they experience this food insecurity, the word of God comes to Isaiah, and Isaiah says this. He says, "Come, all you who are thirsty, come to the waters, and you who have no money, come buy and eat. Come buy wine and milk without money and without cost. Why spend money on what is not bread, and your labor on what does not satisfy? Listen to me and eat what is good, and you will delight in the richest of fare." So these people that haven't known where their next meal was coming from, these people that had this sense of food insecurity, to them God is offering the richest of fare, to eat what is good and to get it at no cost. And that should drive, like, any of you good, cheap Mennonites out there should, like, take attention to that. Like, free food? Actually, I'm told don't go to Costco on Sunday after church because all the Mennonites are there getting the free samples. So, reals. At this point, I realized I have to get my notes out because I wasn't going to say that. Let's stay to the notes. But for the Israelites, like, this is an invitation to them to come to God. The dinner bell is ringing. This is mom yelling out the back door. Dinner is served. Come and get it. The people are drawn to this invitation to come and eat and drink that which is good. So I asked the question, is this about physical food, or is this about something else? Is this about something spiritual, something next level? And again, I think the answer is yes. Because we in the West, we probably separate those things a little too quickly, our food and our faith and spiritual matters. But look just at some of the stories that we find in the Bible. For instance, Psalm 23. We know this one. There's a passage in there where it says, and I always go to the King James Version when I quote, "Thou preparest a table before me." Oh, there's food involved in this one. In the New Testament, there's this language about the marriage supper of the Lamb. So many metaphors being mixed there at this one time. But still, like, this is about what? This is about heaven. Heaven is described as a banquet with food. And we look at the New Testament, how many times do we see Jesus eating with people, eating with the tax collectors, the sinners, the Pharisees, the powerful, the rich, the elite? Across the board, Jesus is eating with these people. And something that we're going to reenact here later today, the Last Supper. Is this about the food, or is it about something else? Well, maybe we too quickly separate those things. Maybe it is about both. So I started thinking about food. Maybe I do that enough already, but I started thinking about how I eat food and how I take it for granted. And I realized that one of the things that I do is I eat really fast. You too? Okay. Like, I will grab a bite to eat. Often I don't even sit down when I eat. I'll stand at the kitchen counter and eat. I'm usually the first one done at mealtime. And I'm out there washing dishes while everybody else is still eating. Like, I eat quickly. I don't give much attention to what I'm doing. And as I'm thinking about this, I'm going back in my memory bank, and I'm remembering this story about my cousin Stephen. Steve is a year older than me. And I didn't eat often with Steve, but the times I did eat with Steve, it's memorable. So Steve had this very unique stance that he took when he ate. And I haven't eaten with him for 25 years. He may have changed things. Steve is left-handed, but when he eats, like his plate would be here, and he like would lean over his plate with his right hand and eat with his left hand and just kind of shovel it in like that. And somebody decided that this was because Steve had 5 brothers and sisters, and he felt that he needed to guard his food to keep it away from the rest of the family. And it'd be funny, like, to find out if Steve still eats like that today. But when you're one of 6 children, that makes sense. But I still have this idea that I eat too quickly. And not only do I just shovel it down without thinking about what I'm eating, I don't take the time to think about where it comes from. Because so much of our food comes from places, that's a little grainy there, grainy food. Look at that. That was funny and unintentional. So much of our food comes from the frozen food section in the grocery store. It's prepared. Some of it's even pre-cooked. You can eat it straight from the package. And you don't have any idea where this food came from. Again, you could ask some kids, where does chocolate milk come from? And they'll probably say, from a brown cow. People don't really think about where their food comes from. And when we hurry through our meal, when we hurry through the food prep, we don't take time to really dig our hands in the dirt and get that dirt under our fingernails. We don't take time to water and till the soil. We don't take time to harvest and store the plants. We miss the opportunity to share our abundance with other people, like some of you do week after week here at church. Thank you, Will, for frequently sharing your food. We miss all of that, and I think when we miss all of that, when we jump over quickly, when we just look at that food as something I have to eat quickly so I can get back to work, we miss the spiritual side of it. We miss all that went into that food getting to our plate and into our belly. We miss the provider of that food and his presence in that food. If we look at our passage today from Isaiah, we see that Isaiah does not just skip over this connection. He goes seamlessly from this idea that this food, come and eat what is free, come and drink for free, quickly goes then to this passage about seek the Lord while he may be found, call on him while he is near. As like, was this ADHD Isaiah again, just jumping all over the place? No, there's a connection here. Let them turn to the Lord, and he will have mercy on them, and to our God, for he will freely pardon. There is this offer of abundance of food and an abundance of grace as well. Isaiah frequently connects food and faith. It is a spiritual practice. Raising our food, cooking our food, eating our food. I read an article this week from a Bible scholar named Doug Bratt. And Doug Bratt quotes a book called Lying Awake. I didn't get the author of the book, Lying Awake. But it's a story about a bunch of nuns that live in a convent near Los Angeles. Sounds like a story like you'd want to read, right? But these nuns, they do everything they can to kind of do away with the distractions of this world. And that's part of being a nun. You get away from the rest of the world. So things that would distract them, things like electronics, things like newspapers, things like men, like all these things are not a part of their community. Men can distract you from following Jesus. Keep that in mind, ladies. Amen, right? No. Goes both ways. Notes again. Notes, Kevin. Anyway, so these nuns are living in this convent, and they also realize that food and drink, fancy food and drink, can be a distraction. And they're right. So every day when they sit down, a couple times a day, they don't talk during their meal. They eat a very simple meal, very bland, with tepid water, while somebody reads the Bible as they eat. This is their routine, however many times a day this is going on. No fancy food, no fancy drink, tepid water, simple food. Somebody's reading to them from the Bible each and every day. And not only that, in this book they have a human skull sitting at the head table in their cafeteria. And the human skull is there to remind them that all the things around them, even the food and drink that they're eating, is temporary. The only thing that will endure is their relationship with God. Where they got a human skull, I don't know. You don't ask the nuns these questions. You just roll with it. But the point was that they saw this as a distraction, the food and the drink. And yes, indeed, like these things can become an obsession. It can be, like gluttony is called a sin in the Bible. But what the author here was trying to point out is they're missing something. They're missing the joy around them. The conversations that come out of these kind of gatherings, the community that is built from a shared meal. So I say not only is food a spiritual gift, it's also the act of eating with others is a spiritual gift and a spiritual practice. So I say it like this: the process from seed to table is a spiritual practice. To sit and enjoy a meal with others is a spiritual practice. So we miss something if we move too quickly through today's scripture. We miss these connections. And there's one more thing that I think I need to point out because it's very easy to miss this as well. So we have this section about come and eat this free food. Like we took attention to that, right? Hoo-hoo, free food. This part about grace and about freedom, like God freely being among us, God's spirituality, like being with us, this presence of God. But in between those two kind of sections, there's this one verse. It's not even a full verse. Verse 5a. It says, surely you will summon nations you know not, and nations you do not know will come running to you. Now again, this is in the context of eating, this grand banquet with all this free food. So are you telling me, God, as you speak through Isaiah, that at this large meal, this lovely meal that I'm not going to have to pay anything for, I'm going to have to eat with strangers? Like, I'm going to be sitting with people I don't know. Like, and not only that, like, if you think about this, like, nations you do not know, these people would have been their enemies. Like, probably the people that took them into exile. And I come back to that passage I mentioned from Psalm 23. Thou preparest a table before me. Help me remember that. How's it go? In the presence of mine enemies. And I've said before, I don't think like that's just so that they have to sit there and watch you eat. Look at this, it's another drumstick. I bet that looks good, huh? No, like, I think they sit with you. So I'm focusing on this passage, trying to understand what that might look like. And I go back to my younger days, back when my back didn't hurt. So way back there. Way back. Thanks, John. Back to my days as an undergraduate at The Ohio State University. Yeah, I.O. They might have won last night. Thank you for noticing. As I'm finishing up my undergraduate degree, I worked at an Amish restaurant just outside of Columbus, Ohio. You know the style of restaurant? They have a buffet, and it's like all-day buffet. So any time of the day, you can get multiple kinds of gravy. So now you're taking notes. I noticed that. Like you go for breakfast, you get sausage gravy. You go for lunch, you get turkey gravy or beef gravy. You could get gravy and diabetes anytime you want throughout the day. Yeah. So one of the things that I remember about my time working at this Amish restaurant is when you first walked into the place where they serve food, into the dining room, in the first row of tables, they had 2 six-top tables pushed together. So 12 people could sit at this one table, 14 if you put a person on each end. This table was called the farmer's table. It was designated for people who didn't have anyone else to sit with. So the idea was, if somebody was going to work, they could stop by. The buffet is always hot and open. You can go in, grab yourself a plate, sit down at this table. You didn't have to wait in line. You didn't have to go through a person to sit you down or anything like that. Grab your plate, go sit down, sit and eat with some people. And it was common that people would come, before work or at lunchtime. A guy named Jerry would always come and sit in the same place. He got salad bar only. He was a mechanic. I remember talking to him every time he came in. Jerry came in, got salad bar only, sat on the far right side in that corner, ate his meal, and left. Truckers would pass through. They would, they didn't want to wait on a table and they didn't want to sit by themselves. They sat at the farmer's table. You would have people that came through on business, don't want to sit by themselves, sit at the farmer's table. And after a while, there's something going on there at the farmer's table. And I don't know what exactly to call it. What brings people back day after day, morning after morning. Is it the biscuits and gravy? Maybe. They were good. Maybe it's something else. Something we call community. Something that's almost a spiritual interaction. Because these people that didn't know each other, so many of them were just passing through, or those that did come back week after week or day after day, people like Jerry, you soon start to build relationships with people that you normally wouldn't get to know. And then one day when Johnny doesn't show up, guess what? People call him and check to make sure he's okay. Or when Mary shares about how her mother is under hospice care and she's not doing well, well, somebody steps up and says, hey, I'll sit with her for a period of time so you can get some chores done around the house. Or when we find out that Robert had a grandchild, somebody picks up the tab for his breakfast that day. Say, hey, that $7.99 buffet, that's on me. Congratulations, Grandpa. What is going on there is nothing short of a spiritual practice. It's something that I believe we can all do to learn from as well. Something that we need to do and slow down. Because I believe that we and I somehow lost the point. When we rush through our meal, when we forget about where our food came from or never even know, we miss out on that spiritual dimension. And when we forget about people that are sitting around us and just worry about getting that food down as quickly as possible, we miss out on the community that God has placed us in. Eating is a spiritual act. It is a spiritual discipline. Reflecting on where our food comes from, raising it ourselves even, is a spiritual discipline. Eating with others is a spiritual discipline. So we come to this last passage from today. I thought this was going to be a shorter sermon. Look at that. And verse 12 says, you will go out in joy and be led forth in peace. The mountains and the hills will burst into songs before you, and all the trees of the field will clap their hands. Now, trees don't clap their hands. Trees don't even have hands, right? Well, then why do they have so many rings? I hear they get a new one every year. This experience... All right, I'll wrap it up. This experience that I'm calling spiritual results in much joy. So much so that even the trees of the field will clap their hands. So today I wanted to share in a little meal before our meal, a little pre-gaming here. And every time that we met out at the park, we tried to have communion together. And I wanted to do that today, and we're still going to do that. So if you didn't get one of these cups, you can grab one quick or raise your hand and someone can run back and grab them for you. You're set. So I invite you to take this glass, this cup. Can you grab a couple? Grab two. Grab the cup and remember that on the night when Jesus was betrayed, Howard and Ruth could use one here. On the night when Jesus was betrayed, he met with his disciples in the upper room, a diverse group of people. And he took the bread that night and he broke it. He gave it to his disciples. And he said, this is my body, broken for you. When you eat of this bread, do so in remembrance of me. And I invite you to take that wafer and eat that. Think about where that came from. And after the meal, Jesus took the cup. He blessed it and he gave it to his disciples. He said, this is my blood shed for you, blood of the new covenant. Drink of this in remembrance of Jesus. And when you eat of the bread and drink of the cup, remember, this is in fact a spiritual practice. Amen. This brings us to the time of our service for the sharing of praises and prayer concerns. What can we be praying for today?